Hello, everyone. My name is Lala Jackson. I'm on the content team here at Beyond Type 1, and today I am joined by Dan Lillienquist. He is the board chair of Civica, and he's here to talk about the exciting news that they just announced today. Dan, thank you so much for being here. I want to turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about the news that was announced today.
Yeah, great to be with you, Lala. I'm so excited. We've just announced today that Civica Rx, which is a nonprofit generic drug company, will be manufacturing insulin. And we are developing 3 molecules of insulin, a Civica version of Humalog, Novolog, and Lantus that we hope to bring to the market in 2024. And hopefully, fix the outrageous insulin pricing that's happened in this country. And I'm excited about it.
It is so exciting. I have lived with type 1 since I was 10 years old. I have gone through many bouts of not being able to afford insulin, the life-sustaining drug that we need to survive. And so the idea that a nonprofit manufacturer is entering this space and trying to make sure it can be offered at such a low accessible price is going to be life-changing to a lot of folks. It's going to change how we navigate the world and are able to access these things. So I'd love to dive in a little bit into what is Civica Rx? Why are they choosing to make this step?
Yeah, so Civica, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit drug company, and it came out of an idea that I had in August of 2016. You remember the EpiPen story and the egregious pricing of EpiPen, and I grew up with 3 brothers who had type 1 diabetes, and I saw up close and personal their struggles with insulin affordability over the years. And it really bothered me. I had served in the Utah State Senate, ran for the US Senate, lost that race, but began writing a column for a local newspaper. And when the EpiPen story happened, it really bothered me. These are drugs that have been on the market for decades. And somehow people were able to corner these products and essentially hold patients hostage. And so I thought, gosh, government has tried to solve this and they've really struggled to solve it. What if we did something differently? What if we organized a new type of business? And that's where the idea of Civica came. Let's create a nonprofit company that operates efficiently and effectively like a for-profit would, but with the shareholders being society, and particularly those who struggle with disease, rather than a subset of people who want to make money at somebody else's expense. And so that was an idea. I got off that treadmill. I came home and I told my wife, look, this is my idea. And she said, look, that's the best idea I've ever heard. And we just started pulling it together. And we launched Civica in 2018, primarily focused on hospital drugs, which were in short supply, and we're struggling to get those as well, antibiotics and general pain relief drugs, et cetera. And we organized 1/3 of the US hospitals to come with us in that endeavor. But almost immediately after we launched Civica, we launched an effort with large payers, a company called Civica Script, to organize health insurance companies to do the same. And it's really the combination of Civica Rx and Civica Script, the hospitals and the payers, and now with the Civica Foundation that gave us the platform to take on insulin. And I'm just really excited about it. I mean, I don't own a penny of stock in this organization. I'll never make a dime. I don't want to, but hopefully we can bless a lot of lives with what we're doing. Civica has already treated 28 million people with products that Civica has made. So this is an organization that's already functioning, operating. Insulin will just be our next effort to bring affordability to patients.
I think that's one of the things that's really exciting, is that you've proven you can do it with other drugs. We know the insulin market is ridiculously complex and opaque, and there's a lot of players doing a lot of things. And so the idea that you've been able to do it with other drugs, now venturing into insulin, you have that under your belt, it brings more promise to the fact that this could actually happen. Before we dive into the logistics of some of that and how it will come to market, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your background and why this is so important to you. Like you've said, you've been in this space a long time. You have brothers who have type 1. You've been working in healthcare a long time. You've been named top innovator, top influential leaders. You've written in the New England Journal of Medicine about why there's a case for a nonprofit drug manufacturer. Why is this work so deeply important to you?
Lala, so I grew up in a home. My dad was a professor of medicine at Vanderbilt. He was an endocrinologist. I was born in Nashville, and he moved to Idaho Falls, Idaho, where my mom grew up. She grew up in Idaho because there were no doctors up there that could care for her two nephews and a niece who had type 1 diabetes. When I was 10 years old, my parents adopted a set of twins from Colorado foster care who both shared my birthday. And these twins had fetal alcohol syndrome, but also developed type 1 diabetes at 18 months and 2 years old. And extremely complex diabetes. And frankly, nobody would take them. And my parents adopted them, and they moved into my room with me. So I grew up, as we were trying to help them manage their disease, waking up in the middle of the night dozens of times with my brothers, one of the two of them, sometimes both, in hypoglycemic shock. And it was, with my parents trying to get glucose into their system and bring them out. And I watched them in and out of the hospital with ketoacidosis. Again, really tough. They had a hard time managing their own disease given their other cognitive difficulties. And then when I was 14, my younger brother, a biologic brother, got the chicken pox, and then afterwards developed type 1 diabetes himself. So I grew up with this, and I've seen the burden of disease, not only the crushing, constant effort to stay healthy, but then watching how insulin prices have grown by double digits every year for the last 20 years. It's become an unaffordable disaster for people who are already managing a really complex disease. And so I looked at this, if there's a modern day version of involuntary servitude, it's having type 1 diabetes, because you literally owe your soul to the company store, and that company store tells you how much you're going to pay to live. And so many people have gotten in on the act that diabetes drugs, of the entire rebate model that drives the PBM structure, the 10 drugs that drive 80% of the rebate model, and there's almost $100 billion in rebates paid every year. The number 2 and number 3 are fast-acting and long-acting insulin. And so that's what we're determined to fix with Civica. It's that these drugs, these formulas are clearly past their patented life. They belong in the public domain. And what Civica's mission is to make sure that now that they're in the public domain, to make sure that they are available and affordable to everybody. And so, for my brothers, this is a personal thing for me. This is extremely emotional for me too, because I just know I've seen it up close, the suffering that people have experienced by not affording their medication, and we can fix it.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the really key points. Often the word that's used to describe insulin is life-saving, but that almost implies that it's an intervention when something has gone wrong, rather than the life-sustaining. It's like water. We need it to survive. And so the idea that there are so many companies and systems that block us from getting the thing that we need to survive is shameful. It's truly a mess. So I want to dive in a little bit to how Civica plans to navigate the current mess. You talked a bit about PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, rebates. For our audience who doesn't know how that all works together, it's just a system of the insulin is made, but then it has to go through all of these hurdles, and dollars are added on top of it until it gets to the person who needs it to survive. How does Civica plan to navigate this existing messed up system?
Well, it starts really at the core, and that is Civica. Nobody owns us. We're governed by health systems and philanthropies. We've got large payers who are also involved, and they don't own us either. What we've done is we've raised nearly $100 million from philanthropy, and we're just getting started on our fundraising efforts. We actually raised that in about 10 weeks, and just with a few phone calls, because so many people are interested in this. And given Civica's track record, we had a really good story to tell. But it's really simple. We are going to make insulin, and it's going to be a totally transparent model. Since nobody owns Civica, there's no shareholders to pay. And so we're only going to charge enough for us to be a self-sustaining organization. And then what we're also going to do is when we make that available to retailers, to pharmacies, et cetera, is very clearly publish on our vials, probably through a QR code, what we think a fair price is for the retail. Because obviously, there's a service that people provide, pharmacies, et cetera, to dispense a drug. But we are going to publish essentially a manufactured maximum retail price so that people know whether or not they're getting ripped off. And we've also just agreed we're not going to pay rebates to make a market. And I think that that's one of the challenges here is that the existing supply chain, the PBMs, the wholesalers, the pharmacy benefit, all of that supply chain, they've created the pathway or the highway between the manufacturer and the patient. And then after a serious consolidation, they became highwaymen. They essentially take tolls along that entire road. And what that means is that when a patient shows up and pays, if you're on a high deductible plan or you have no insurance at all, you're paying $200, $300 for a vial of insulin. And what happens is that money gets spread around on the back end among these different players. And so it all comes down to the patient paying the cost. So what Civica is doing is saying, we're not going to play that game. We're going to work we'll work with any retailer who wants to carry us, any pharmacy who wants to carry us, we'll work with them, but they're going to work with them on our terms. And essentially it is, we're going to publish a fair price for insulin and we're going to hold to that price. The great thing is that we do have large retailers who are interested in doing this because they know that this is wrong. And they're just stuck in a system that's really dominated by the existing players. So we're just trying to create a new market. The beautiful thing is with a life-sustaining medication, at the very least, you can drop ship it into people. And it's going to be so much less expensive that, we just think this will move the entire market. The other great thing about what Civica is doing is not only do we have the funding to do it, but we're building a 140,000 square foot facility that will be completed at the end of this year. That in that facility alone, we'll be able to make a third of the US insulin just in one facility. And which is great. That'll be enough to move the market price and hopefully, change this game altogether. So we're really excited about it.
It is really exciting. I also fully admitting, and I think a lot of our community will feel the same way, I'm almost scared to believe in the possibility of this. It's been so long, it's been so burdensome. It's almost like the joke in the community of there's a cure that's 10 years away. Obviously, it's more complex than that. There's so much science happening behind it. We've never cured an autoimmune disease before. And so letting myself get excited about it almost feels dangerous. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about how you've talked to how Civica is approaching this differently, but I want to dive into the example of biosimilar drugs. So basically a generic version of biologic drugs. We've seen a couple manufacturers try to come to market with a biosimilar, say that it's going to be far more accessible, but it still ends up being $150 for a vial. That's not accessible to most people. Can you explain a little bit about the biosimilars market, how Civica is getting into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So these drugs are biosimilars, so Humalog, Novolog, Lantus, Aspart, Lispro, and Glargine. And they're more complex in manufacturing. What's great about the Civica team, though, is that our team who works, our CEO was the chief quality officer at Amgen. The molecular weight of aspirin, for example, really simple drugs like 150 molecular weight. Humalog or Aspart is 5,200, so it's just logarithmically more complex. But the team that we're working with at Civica, who's running Civica, developed Epogen. Martin Van Trieste helped Amgen develop Epogen. That has a molecular weight of 192,000. Look, these are not complex drugs. They were developed in the 80s when it was really complex. But now this type of science, it's easy to do this. It's not that hard to do. And so we're well into that process with a partner called GeneSys, who's bringing those three molecules forward for us. And the beautiful thing is that the FDA recently created a pathway for interchangeability for biosimilars. And that's what we're going for with these drugs. So when somebody writes a prescription for Humalog down the road or Novolog, what'll happen is it'll, with interchangeability, it'll go to the Civica product. And we're going to be totally transparent, cost plus. There's no reason for Civica to over recover. We will be the lowest price in the market. And that'll allow, you don't have to go and persuade every doctor to change their writing their prescription to write Civica insulin with interchangeability. That'll happen automatically at the pharmacy counter. So it really gives us an opportunity to fundamentally reshape the insulin market. And there's a confluence of, again, we can do this. We know how to do this. Our team knows how to do this. They're really excited about it. And then with the FDA, with interchangeability for biosimilars coming forward, and that pathway is clear, we're confident that Civica will make that happen. If we don't get interchangeability, we still have 140 million people covered by large payers involved in Civica script. And what we're talking about with them is just to have Civica insulin be a tier 1 covered drug, and that would do it as well. So we'll make sure that there's access to these insulins.
And this is all coming aimed for 2024.
Yep.
Aimed for as low as possibly $25 a vial. Is that the aim?
Yeah. So we are going to make it as low as possible. We think it'll be no more than $30 a vial, and that's the retail price. And then for a 5-pack of pens, no more than $55. We actually think we can do better, but we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We think we can actually do better than that, but that it'll be no more than that.
I almost can't even imagine it. It's such a massive change from the current market. So I want to talk a little bit about barriers. The current system is complex. There's a lot of money changing hands. There's a lot of people who are fighting for the status quo. What are some things that could become barriers, and how can the community help get involved and help raise our voices to make sure that those barriers, if they come up, everybody knows about it?
Great. Look, the barriers, I mean, there are complexities in production. We're working through those. We have a team. We know what we're doing. And so there's some risk there, as there is in any business. We're not bearing any risk there that's disproportionate or not uncommon, right? These are all common risks. I think the biggest risk we have is, like, there's so much money that trades hands here already at the expense of people with type 1 diabetes, that the market will try to lock us out. And that's where we need the community to be really aware. When Civica brings insulin to the marketplace, we need to have the community understand where to get it. We need to make sure that they're raising awareness with their pharmacies. If a pharmacy chooses not to carry it, pharmacies right now will try to buy buy the product as low as possible and sell it as high as possible. And we're trying to end that with respect to insulin. And so we're going to need this community to be aware where they can get the product, and also to put pressure on retail pharmacies who don't carry Civica insulin to carry it. Now, we'll get the ball rolling on our side too. We have a couple of large retailers that'll carry our insulin, and frankly, I think everybody will end up carrying it, because a life-sustaining medication that you need every day, people will go to find a place to get it where they can also balance their financial needs as well. So, I'm sure there's going to be some shenanigans. We also have a lot of very interested parties from across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, who are very supportive of what we're doing. It's a free market approach. We're not asking the government we don't have our hand out to the government. We'll partner with the government, but we're going to do this. And as a result, this is really a free market way to go about this. And so it's, both sides of the aisle seem to like it. And we're also going to be watching very closely. Our legislative leaders nationally will be watching very closely how the market responds. And, we expect oligopolies and monopolies to try to preserve their market share. But on this one, I think we've got the right methodology to kind of pierce that and democratize insulin. So, we'll engage with this group. We'll let you know how to help. This will be an ongoing conversation. What we should probably be doing, Lala, is have regular updates so we can let you know we're hitting milestones, and we'll do that. Civica is a transparent company. And again, we only exist to make sure that patients receive the medications they need and that they're affordable.
I know I've said this several times in our talk, but I'm so excited to watch this happen. I'm excited to fight for it if need be. I know there's been years in my life where I couldn't afford insulin. It was always that feeling of where is the next vial going to come from? How am I going to keep myself alive? And that level of tension we hold in our bodies, everyone who's gone through it, is something that can't be described to anyone else who hasn't gone through it. It's like being in a permanent, about to be in a car crash state. And so the idea that there's a possibility for this to change, that the entire market can change, I think it's something that me and everyone in this community who has dealt with this are willing to follow along, to do whatever needs to happen to make sure it does happen. So as we close out this conversation, what would you like people who rely on insulin to know about you and about Civica?
Well, I just want you to know that I understand the struggle you go through. I see it with my brothers. One of my brothers has since died by suicide, partly because of the stress that he's under. My other brothers are dealing with this disease every day. My dad's an endocrinologist, as is another brother who's an endocrinologist. Diabetes is in our blood, and I think what I love about what we're trying to do here. I grew up on the stories of Banting and Best, Frederick Banting and Charles Best, how they discovered insulin in a miraculous, this miracle drug, and how they donated for $1 to the University of Toronto the patent, because they wanted to make sure that nobody was excluded from being treated. We lost our way as a society on that one, and I don't think it's society at large. I think people understand that this is broken, but I think there are certain choke points in this process that have allowed abuse to happen, and I think it's cost lives, and it's certainly cost peace of mind and economic stability. And so what I want you to know about me is, I'm playing for a societal return here. It'll matter for my brothers, but it'll matter equally for everybody else to the same level. And that excites me. What I love about this is that we can do these things. We can tackle some of these societal issues with market forces themselves. And it's just about organizing a new market. And so what I'm talking to right now is the demand side of that market. All of you who take insulin every day, if you vote with your feet, we can make this happen. We'll bring the insulin to the market, and then we just got to make sure we can find you. And when we find you, we'll create a new market and a new day for people with diabetes.
I'm so excited to keep tabs on everything that you're doing. I'm excited to keep talking to you over these next few years as we see Civica come into the market. And I am so excited for that day in 2024 where we get to have little dance parties and celebrate the day it's available to folks. Thank you so much for your time today and for updating us on this news. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Lala. Good to be with you.